Welcome, everybody, to No Driving Gloves, final edition of 2019. And because of the tight schedules, I went digging through the old hard drives here in the No Driving Gloves studios, and we're going to replay. Well, it's not even a replay. We're going to release a lost episode. Back in July, we recorded an episode interviewing one of the two gentlemen that kind of went. Well, we kind of feel it's a little bit crazy to do. We kind of did at the time, but we wanted to know why. And him and a buddy purchased a company called Sterling Sports Cars, LLC. It's a company that rebodied Volkswagens back in the 70s into this kind of really cool futuristic sports car. Still looks kind of modern today. And they went back into production, building bodies, trying to build parts to restore and keep these Sterling and the various names this car's been sold under over the years in production and on the road. But at the time, in July when we did the interview, I think they had only owned the company a couple of months. We're still putting some stuff together, so I'm not sure what the social media aspect and things, but you can find them on Sterling Sports Cars LLC on Facebook. They do have a website that's still under construction, sterlingsportscars.com. But you can really follow them on Facebook and see where they're at with the parts and that. I know they've recently been popping some bodies out of the molds they purchased, getting everything in line, and I think 2020 they'll be ready to go to retail sale. That's just my opinion. That's not their statements, but hopefully you enjoy this kind of interesting interview on why somebody would purchase a car company, try to get into this replica car, kit car, whatever you want to call it. It's really not even it's not a replica car. It was its own design. But see why they got into this business, what their goals are, and in case one of these cars might interest you, feel free to look them up. It really was an interesting episode to do with them. So until we can join you next year with a new, freshly recorded episode, we here at No Driving Gloves hope you had a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Talk to you in 2020. Well, we're going to jump right into the episode of No Driving Gloves tonight. We've got a special guest. He's on the East Coast, kind of late for him. So before Will and I and Derek kind of do our normal, what's on the bench segment, we're going to quickly, jump into Rick, respect his time. We've got a guest, to me, kind of a slightly crazy guy. He now owns his own car company, and it's his name's Rick Milne. Excuse me if I mispronounced your last name. But, Rick, why don't you give us a quick little rundown of who you are? We don't need to know where you were born and where you went to high school, but kind of how you got into the car industry and how you've actually in the last couple of weeks bought a historic car company.
Well, John, to put the record straight, my last name is pronounced Milne with a silent E. Think A.A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh. It's somewhere down the family lineage is a distant relative, I'm sure. My full daytime job is I am actually a sign crafter. I do graphic design and build and make signs and vehicle lettering and all that kind of stuff. So I've been around cars in one form or another for the better part of 25 years with the company. How I got into the Sterling, in a nutshell, in college, going through a bookstore one day, I saw what was, I guess it's still around, Hot VW's magazine, and there was this black car on the cover. And kind of piqued my interest, so I picked it up, and here it was a Sterling that had been modified by a fellow by the name of Kenny Youngblood. If anybody knows Kenny Youngblood, he is and still active, very proficient designer and illustrator and all kinds of stuff, and he threw his special talents into this car, and it was just fabulous, and I was kind of captivated by it. Of course, that time, just out of school, I couldn't afford anything even close to that, so that went on the back burner. So fast forward a number of years, and married to my beautiful wife, and on a whim ordered a little magazine that was called Kit Car Quarterly, which was actually published in a location not too far from me here in Pennsylvania. And the name was kind of misleading because it was like a 10-page little tablet-sized rag that went out, and if you got it twice a year, it was a lot, even though it was a quarterly publication. And in one classified section was a photo of a tire in the front quarter of a Sterling. And I said, oh, I remember those cars. And, the internet was still very at its infancy at that point. So I called the fella and talked to him for quite a while, and he was out in Michigan, and he was the original owner, and it was like the 13th car off the line. So we struck a deal, and I was all excited because I was going to get this really cool car, and drove out one weekend with a buddy's trailer and pulled up to his house, up his driveway, and had the garage open, and I saw the car sitting there, and my first impression was, oh my God, that thing's small. So, I'm not a big guy, but I'm 6 foot and long legs, and I'm thinking, boy, I hope I can get in that thing. So he rolled it out, and I sat in it, and I said, well, there's going to have to be some work here with the floor pans, but I can deal with it. And ever since then, I was kind of hooked with the Sterling brand.
Basically, you've recently purchased the whole Sterling. What is it? Sterling Sports Cars, I believe, is the official name of. It
is Sterling Sports Cars. The name itself will be changed slightly, just for logistical reasons. I am a partner in the company. A friend of mine put forth the vast majority of the allowance to purchase the company, but we did so in hopes of returning the car back into production. What had happened in the past was, now a quick vignette here, the Sterling is the only VW-based kit car that has been in continuous production since 1973. So that in its own right is something to save. The fellow that...
Since we're audio here, let's go ahead and describe the Sterling car, because it in itself has some unique features. And, of course, we'll put pictures up on Instagram and Facebook and social media when this episode's out, so that the listeners, if they don't know, can go look at it. And we're going to be a couple of weeks till your episode hits, and hopefully you guys have revamped your website and stuff by then. And maybe
I hope so. We have it parked right now, and we're working on it. The Sterling was based or is based on the UK's Nova kit car, which was designed back in actually 1969 by two fellows by the name of Richard Oakes, and he was actually a sign guy, just like me, and his buddy, who was an engineer, Phil Sayers. They developed this car to fit on a Volkswagen chassis, which were as common as beans back then, but they wanted something a little bit different. Richard Oakes was building dune buggies at the time, but he felt there was a need for a slightly sportier version of a dune buggy that had a roof and, something that was a little bit more weatherproof. So what they designed was a very low-slung, very sleek-looking car. The unique feature of the car, of course, is it has no doors. It has a fully one-piece lifting canopy. The side windows and the front windshield all come up as one piece on this car. Around 1972 or so, a fellow was over in the UK. He was a salesman, saw one of the cars and called a buddy of his, and sent him a picture somehow. I guess he mailed it or whatever. But they approached the Oakes Sayers duo about licensing the car for the United States. These two folks were Cecil Robertson and Norm Rose. Neither one had a whole lot of experience in the car business, but they were able to to get their licensing, they bought a Nova, put it on a 747, and flew it over and started making molds from that particular Nova. By 1973, their corporation, California Component Cars, was up and running and had quite the following. They were active until about 1978 or so, when the craze started to die out a little bit. And rough estimates were they sold about 857 cars or something like that. After they've closed, the company changed hands numerous times, stayed mostly on the West Coast. Not too many improvements. There were two other versions that were made off the original Nova cast. Each version was slightly larger than the last. A couple of little minor feature changes in the wheel wells and taillights and all that. But not many of those were sold. There were about 5 or 6 of each one of those sold. So it kind of fell into a state of limbo. There was a fellow up in Oregon who bought the molds in the mid to late 80s, and he was pretty much just a backyard hobbyist, and he was able to keep the brand alive for a number of years. I talked to him off and on in the early 90s. He had a website when the internet was up and running. It was called Solid Sterling, and I'm sure people who research that, I think if you go to the Wayback Machine, I think it's even still bookmarked there. This fellow Mike was instrumental in not only keeping the brand alive, but he made some little minor improvements and actually created a target top for it, which is great in hotter weather. And he kept on that until probably the late 90s, when it turned over again to a fellow out in the western part of PA here in Pittsburgh. And he just took it and ran. Kept it active, and like most people with a lot of irons in the fire, he kind of grew tired of the company after a while and put it up for sale, and a fellow in Delaware bought it with all good intentions, but it kind of fell to the wayside. I think he kind of bit off more than he can chew with the logistics of it, and the model sat for about 3 years. So he had put it up for sale.
I think that kind of happens to a lot of us, doesn't it? In that, I mean, we've got Will and Derek and us and the listeners, and I think all of us, being car people, have this fantasy of being able to buy a car company. I know I do, and buy the molds and such, and be able to kind of do this endeavor. And that's what I always think. I can't remember, you and I share a couple of different Facebook groups and that over the kit car industry, and molds come up for sale all the time, and we go, oh, we'd love to have that. And then you realize the amount of work and the amount of marketing. What brought the Sterling, obviously you've had a passion for Sterling for many, many years, and I think you and I met each other when I was judging at Carlisle. We determined, 17 or 18
I believe we did at one point, yeah.
And
I believe we did.
And you've got this passion, you decide, and I want to say, you and I are in a Bradley GT group, and one of the biggest problems I have with this Bradley GT group is anytime somebody tries to be aggressively priced on their Bradley GT, the whole group says, oh, they're overpriced, blah, 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 and you're hurting your market.
Right.
You go to the
it's just a Volkswagen, and they made 1 million of them.
and now people are buying Bradleys so that they can restore their VWs, because there's some parts there. But the Brubaker Box Group, there's only a dozen of these things in the world, and they have a great following, and the cars are worth money. And I'll be honest, I'm not a member of the Sterling Group. Are the Sterling owners out there? Are they passionate? Are you going to just go ahead and produce cars, or are you going to kind of get into the parts business and then eventually go to potentially selling complete cars?
Yeah, Right. Yeah. For right now, we're just going to be a parts producer. We have to get the panels out to people that need them, that are restoring their own cars. At some point, we are going to investigate actually creating a whole new body, just for the reason of, since the Volkswagen drivetrains and chassis are getting rarer. I mean, we can still get them from Mexico, but eventually that part's going to run out.
No, the Volkswagens aren't $200 cars anymore. So.
No, that's exactly right. So we do have long range plans to work on a water cooled mid engine version, but that's going to require some body work. So we're well far out from that right now, and like as I mentioned, we literally just purchased a company a couple of weeks ago. I was actually down looking at the molds today where they're being stored, and we're trying to determine the correct course of action for who's actually going to be doing the fiberglass for us. Where they're at now, the fellow is fine, but he's a one-man man. He can't handle it all. So we're kind of on the hunt for a different fabricator, somebody who can kind of step up and take care of the casting of the molds and the boxing and the shipping and all that kind of stuff. So that's where we're at right now. We'll probably have something locked down by the end of the month. There's quite a few people around us that will do that. It's just a matter of finding the right company that's going to be the fit that's going to work for us.
It's kind of to me, an interesting endeavor, and then the plans of a mid-engine car and restructuring to that, and what I always see now, it seems, is I think, can you buy, like, say I got Mid-America's VW parts catalog, can I buy a Volkswagen floor plan and then put my Subaru motor in there and things? Or are you kind of looking at doing a tube frame like, say, the factory 5818, or?
Well, that is part of the plan. Is we're gonna design a tube frame. I'm gonna have to get together with a chassis fabricator who will, I might even call Will, because he's probably more familiar with it than me.
But yeah, I mean,
we have some good ideas that we would like to implement. It's just a matter of, can we do it economically? So,
Will, what's your thoughts on? Since we know you've built one or two chassis or reinforced one or two chassis, and you're sitting there kind of quiet.
Well, I'm just listening and trying to learn. Building chassis is really not a difficult thing if you're building the same thing over and over and over again. And it can actually be really cost effective. One of my pretty good friends owns Unique Motor Cars here in Gadsden, Alabama, and I'm really good friends with his chassis fabricator. And he can knock out a chassis in less than a week. And I mean, that's a rolling chassis, brake lines, everything done. So, ultimately, I think that's probably going to be the best way to go, being that you can produce a chassis cheaper than you can go find a donor car.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean,
exactly.
It's just cutting and welding. I mean, that's all it is. And there's a bunch of people out there that are really good at cutting and welding. And
there's a lot more that are good at cutting, but
exactly right.
There's a lot more that aren't good at either.
You know what you call a bad welder, right? A good grinder.
Oh, there you go.
So,
and I got a stack of grinding wheels to prove
it. I guess my biggest question for you is, I'm in the hot rod industry, and I've at Big Oak Garage, my shop, we've never built a fiberglass car. We've been in business for 12 years. And I mean, we've never even built a fiberglass 32 Ford, Model A, anything, which we're more sheet metal fabricators. So, I tend to shy away from fiberglass bodies and stuff. And I've noticed in the last, I'm going to say 10 years, most of the companies that have produced fiberglass bodies, and now I'm just talking about bodies. I've never been into the kit car thing. So, but most of those companies are really struggling right now in producing bodies and trying to get them sold for people building them, because companies like Brookville's come out with a steel 32 Ford and a Model A, and the 40 Ford Coupes are out there, the 55, 6, and 7 Chevrolets are out there. So I think it's awesome that you've bought a company that's been around that long and really trying to save it and bring it back to hopefully what it was before. And I know history repeats itself, but do you see that market? And maybe the kit car market's not as bad as the fiberglass body 32 Ford street rod market.
No,
but do you see
it's pretty thin.
Is it? So do you see that it's going to trying to make a comeback, or are y'all just really trying to save a cool company and help the people out that have these cars that are trying to get them built that can't get parts for them? So I guess that's my
yes.
Go ahead.
In a nutshell, yes. The kit industry, I mean, since I'm going to say 2010, 2009, has been steadily declining, at least in the classic kits. I don't know. I'd love to see how Factory 5 is doing with their sales on their cars, because I know they were always the top contenders. I mean, their Cobras and the Daytonas and even their street rods always sold very well. But I don't know how they're doing now, and it's none of my business. But as a general industry, it's soft in the way that the vintage kits like the Sterling and the Bradleys and all that, the people that understand the car, and that's the key word, are in my age bracket, and we either had them or we have them. The folks that are under my age bracket really don't have the ability to build a car from scratch, or if they have a specific vehicle that kind of piqued their interest, say an Aquila. I was talking with a guy earlier today that just bought one, doesn't quite understand the connection between how Volkswagen works and how a rebody works. And the thing I get all the time is, well, I want to drop a V8 into it. Well, be my guest, but you're not going to go around a corner. The engineering was built for a car that weighs 2,000 pounds at most. And the guys that want the big V8 rumble and all this good stuff, yes, you can do it with some heavy body massaging, but it's not going to perform anywhere near it looks. You can go in a straight line and don't try to stop in a dime, because it's just not going to happen. So our goal is to, provide the parts for owners and people that are interested, and B, develop a tube chassis with a more modern power plant, maybe whether it be a Honda or whatever, that has enough horsepower that'll make it fun, but yet it will also appeal to the younger crowd who just like to hook up their computers to a tuning program. If we can provide a rolling chassis that they can just drop a motor into, all the better. So that's kind of where we're going. Our engine selections at this point, unless we do a body modification, are very, very limited because you don't have the space behind the cab. Hence, we would have to, kind of redesign the body to make that space. And to do that, we'd have to be able to make it flow and look right. Because if it doesn't look right, it's not going to sell. And that's where I'm going to have to come in from my design background.
Is your intention, as you've brought it up a couple of times, redesigning and looking at this potential mid-engine or alternative power plants, and one of the things that I know about the Sterling car, and I always remember about the Sterling car, is that canopy that raises up for entry and exit and things like that. But there was also kind of a T-top version for a period of time, if I remember correctly.
There was.
Are you still going to have the canopy? Because to me, that's a signature. If I'm going to buy a Sterling, I'm not buying one with the T-top. Are you going to try to keep that feature, or are you going to give the options?
Oh, yeah.
And
no, we're going to keep the canopy. The Targa style canopy that was developed works as long as it doesn't rain.
That's kind of like an old mini truck with its Targa top or its convertible.
Yeah, exactly. Now, my own personal Sterling that I have has the T-top. And even though it's not finished like most of my projects, we are going to eventually splash mold off that T-top and make that an option. So, in an effort to not only try to make it a more open air motoring feel, which it would be, you'll have the option to actually have a weather tight canopy if you do get caught in the rain, which I had got caught in the rain with another car that had T-tops but never had the inserts. So, weatherproofing is pretty important. Airflow is even more important, and air conditioning is probably of the utmost importance. You're basically sitting in a fishbowl, so air conditioning is very, very important in these cars. Yes, you can get it for the Volkswagen motors, but then your horsepower drops by like 15%. So,
15% of 15 really hurts, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. My one car that I just let go about 8 years ago was actually a factory demonstrator car. It had air conditioning in it, and every time I turned it on, the car would die. So it was.
I had an Omni 024 that did that too. But
So we're hoping with a more modern power plant that can handle the scroll compressors and that kind of stuff. That should alleviate a lot of that, and give you the horsepower that I think most people would be comfortable with. You're not going to win drag races, but go ahead.
What about the electric air conditioned option? I know that's kind of getting a little bit of traction in the aftermarket industry.
Yeah, I was looking into that some years ago. I haven't looked into it recently. I know, I think the system I was looking at was 12 volts, but the amperage draw was huge.
Yeah.
So.
It's a big amp draw, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wanted to build an electric powered car using a Tesla pack or something, that would be ideal, because then you could just pull everything off a wrecked Tesla and you'd have all your amperage that you needed. I don't think you would have room for the Tesla pack or a battery pack to handle the amperage and the voltage needed, but I can't say for sure. I've never done it.
I think you guys have asked, I think Will's asked a question, and you've answered a slightly different question, which is a road I went down. Will's talking about, and maybe I'm not listening right here too. That occasionally happens. Will's talking about an electric air conditioning system,
right?
And I think you're talking an electric drive system, which to me right now is the coolest thing. And I don't think the Sterling's dated itself too, much in its design. It's still definitely a little 70s-ish, but it's still something that can be cool. And the way, what EV West is doing with Porsche 550 replicas and Volkswagen buses and Ferraris and you name it, they'll put an electric drive system into anything, and the diversity of the battery packs,
Right. Well, that's kind of why I diverge into an electric drive. If you put an electric air conditioning system into a gasoline-powered car and didn't have enough amperage coming off your alternator to constantly recharge the battery, if you're sitting in traffic, you're going to be draining that battery damn quick. So with a full electric system, electric drive and all that, you would have the amperage reserve to run that air conditioner efficiently. I guess is where I was trying to go to.
I follow that. See, like I said, I think you were answering the question. I wasn't listening right. I'll take the blame for that one. So
no, that's fine because I did diverge.
That's your fault, John.
Yeah,
I'm not blaming anybody. I do tend to ramble at certain times.
Well, Derek's sitting there kind of quiet. I assume he's probably working on his museum cards or something. Trying to get him. Have you thought of anything, Derek, or are you just taking in going, what are these guys talking about? This car doesn't have any brass on it. It doesn't have wooden wheels.
I didn't hear, 454 big block or 327, 350 horse. Fiberglass, I'm supposed to hear those numbers, aren't I?
How about
no, actually,
402 Tornado Drive. That's been
there
done.
we go. There you go. Nice. No, actually, the one thing that went through my mind as you were talking, of course, you're talking about starting out with producing parts for, folks that are restoring the Sterling cars, things like that, and then getting into tube chassis, doing some things. And, to me, it kind of lines up with a lot of what, like DeLorean Motors is doing. They bought up all the spare parts of DeLoreans. Now they're looking at introducing, or they've been throwing around the idea of introducing a new DeLorean. And,
right.
Just kind of, is that something you guys are thinking about ever introducing an actual full car that someone could buy? And if so, and I mean, it sounds like you guys are very new to owning the company here. But I'm curious, I've never talked to anyone that's been involved with something of that nature and that kind of magnitude. But, I know I think it was in 2017, the new federal law was passed on low production, vehicles not needing to do certain federal, safety standard things, all those,
right.
Things. Have you guys looked into that? Is that something you're thinking about looking into, all that? And how does that play into your kind of decisions about where you're headed with the company?
Oh, that's got a huge impact on what we're going to look at. To do a full turnkey car, we probably will not do that just because of the liability side of it. We could probably do a Roller Plus where somebody would provide their own drivetrain. That's not out of the realm of possibilities. That said, both the owner and I do have full-time jobs, and to build a Roller Plus, we'd have to expend a lot of personal time to do that. And I don't know if either one of us is ready to fully commit to that yet. I've got a couple of shops that I could probably sub it out to and have them build it. Yeah, but then we're coming into overall costs again. The traditional kit car owner would look at one of these cars that come up for sale for $5,000 or $6,000, and it's not running, and it needs a windshield, and it needs this, and it needs that, and their first thing out of their mouth is, well, geez, that thing's only worth $2,000. So we have to overcome a stigma of worth and the term kit car. California component cars had it right. It's not a kit. It's a component car because you're pulling components off other cars. So our short-term goal is to actually build a prototype, something that's going to have a nice tube chassis and mid-engine with all the amenities that we want to put into it, just as a test bed. And if we can get the test bed running and showing correctly, I'm hoping that we can either hit Carlisle again, because now Carlisle, what it used to be Import Nationals, is now Import and Performance. That's all the tuner crowd now. All the old kit manufacturers pulled out in the last 2 years. There was no interest. So I'm hoping to kind of rekindle that a little bit. I know we were talking with Donnie on Fiber Classics website about starting, a kit-specific show somewhere on the East Coast.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of get to that and touch on that one. Their conversations that way.
I mean, it would be interesting. I think the logistics of that are going to be extremely difficult. It just because of locale and the size of the United States. My fear is that the two big kit shows in California, Knott's Berry Farm and the other one up near the San Francisco area, they've both folded in the last couple of years. Lack of attendance. So how do you get people across the United States that have their cars to get either back into a group that has activity, to bring them out to shows and basically pass the torch to the younger generation. I mean, if you're in your 70s or 80s and have a vintage kit that's actually finished and it runs and all that, who can we find that would appreciate that at a younger age to keep that whole marquee alive? And that's kind of what we're wrestling with, because the Sterling is an old car. It has a lot of cool features, and every time I had mine out, even up to 8 years ago, I get stopped on the street or at the gas stations. Oh my God, where can I get one? And these were for young kids, until they figured out how much it was going to cost them and how much work they had to do. And they said, "Oh, I could just go buy a Honda for $1,500 and turbo the motor or do whatever." I'm like, well, okay, whatever floats your boat. So it's a very tough road to find the people that are actually going to appreciate it and keep the younger generations interested.
Yeah, it's
that's kind of our goal, is to create a car that is affordable.
Now I really like the parts and restoration, and I didn't put the analogy together that Derek did, that you're kind of doing what DMC did, and go ahead and build the market up. And I think I guess you like you said, a Sterling's a $6,000 car, and people think it's worth $2,000, but because the parts availability's been tough the last few years, and I think if there's a reputable company out there that's going to be able to help revitalize those cars, because you're doing this, and if I'm not mistaken, I mentioned them earlier in the show, somebody's trying to bring back the Brubaker box, or the boxes.
Yeah, there's a group in Southern California that has two of the Brubakers, one of each generation, and they are now casting molds and are going to try to market
and
basically a new old box. I have no idea what their price point's going to be. I know what they bought the one car for, and I just kind of laughed. It was just a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, they've always been cool. I was at Carlisle one year. They had a box convention, and I think they had 4 or 5 of the 8 at the that were known at the time. It's one thing the internet's nice for is I think now we think there's a dozen of them, but that's basically a minivan that goes on your Volkswagen with a single side door, and it's
pretty much.
It's kind of it's kind of a cool thing, and it really to me, where I see your component cars and what they've got is we just did an episode, and when we're talking it hasn't released yet, or maybe it just released. Actually it's a couple episodes ago that the kids today getting into cars, and it was Derek and I think Will missed out on that episode, and we chatted about that. We think the kids today are into cars. They're just into it a different way. They don't want to go out into the driveway and build that component car. They build them online, and eventually the money's going to come in, and they're going to want to have something different because they're not going to want to drive the Tesla that the neighbor has, and they're going to want that thing. And I think when you're able to restore them, or you're able to provide those services, or provide shops that can give them, they can buy that for $7,000, put $10,000 into it, have somebody else do the work for them. They end up with something that's unique and enjoyable that fits that maker mindset that's so popular right now. Right. Because now I can 3D print things for this, or I can CNC things for this, and I can work on composites and pour resins and whatever else that those hobbies. And it is the ultimate. And I know I've always had a fantasy about building kit cars. I tried to build a low-cost 7, and I just about completed a Stalker V6, but I got to the point where I had more money than time and bought a Caterham. It was a done deal thing, and got the low cost so far, and then I got the Stalker V6 so far, and then I bought the Caterham and had that for many years and had fun with it, and eventually sold that off. And to be honest, the reason I don't have a collector car or a toy car now is I don't want to do the maintenance to it. I want something that runs and drives and is neat, and that's why everything I own has a warranty now. So even though I'm a car guy who's restored cars for 25 years, when I want to have fun, I want to have fun with the car. I don't want to have to go out to the garage and suffer.
You want to get in and roll. Yep. I completely understand that.
I totally follow your business plan. I give you a tremendous amount of credit, and that's why I wanted to put you on the podcast. You've had some very interesting conversation and thought process, and we kind of understand what you're doing a little bit better. And I wanted to give you some publicity. We don't get thousands of downloads, but we'll get some downloads out of it, and hopefully this can, you can utilize this on your website at some point. Here you are talking about our crazy idea of bringing this company back, and I hope we can have you back on in 10 years and talk about your success.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. Thank you. All right. Will and Derek and John, I appreciate you having me on. I hope I either entertained or confused you. I'm sure a little bit of both.
Well, we proved you confused me.
I'm always a phone call away.
Well, I appreciate your time, and you and I and Donnie need to get together and really try to put some of that kit car show idea back together and figure it out.
Well, yeah, I'd love to lean back on Carlisle because that was kind of central for everybody, and everybody knows the grounds. But see that happening anytime in the future.
Well, we'll make our phone calls and see what we can put together.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I appreciate your time, and hope to talk to you all soon.
Okay, thanks for talking to us tonight.
Good luck with everything.
Right. Thanks. Have a good evening.
Yep.
I'm sorry, what was that, Will?
I said good luck with the new endeavors, man. I hope it works out great for you guys.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
All right, gentlemen. You have a good evening. Take care now.
Thank you.
You too.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Let's see what happens. And like I say, I hope we can have him back in 10 years to talk about how successful he is, but I hope we're here in 10 years.
I was going to say, John, that means we have to be successful for 10 years.
We are. I had a huge argument with a guy this week that I was talking to, telling me Will's probably one of the top 10 hot rod builders in the country. And I kept saying, I don't know if he's top 10, top 50, maybe not top 10. And he kept swearing up and down, and the guy's a hot rod guy. And I'm going, well, maybe Will is. Maybe we have a bit of fame right there. Is there anything any of us want to throw out that we did exciting this week, automobile-wise, or is it the normal thing, and we just go ahead and wrap up this episode at the end? And
I've just been working like normal. Nothing crazy's happened. Nothing special's happened. So, just I did hire an intern from McPherson, so I guess that's kind of exciting. So
that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So he'll be here throughout the summer and then heading back.
Well, maybe after he gets done at your place, he might just quit and go into a different profession.
I'm done.
Well, he's probably going to see that palace Will lives in and the pool and everything and not want to leave. He goes, I don't want to lose this job. I'm going to stay. I'm in the door.
He is staying in my basement, so...
I think you and I talked.
Don't you record in the basement? Are you going to have to move your recording studio?
And didn't you see him walking around naked in the back there?
Dude, I'm in my recliner with a table beside me with my microphone on it and my laptop in my lap. So, I mean, it doesn't get much more relaxing. This is about the only time in the week I get to actually just sit down and relax. So
we don't want to hear about the microphone in your lap.
No, the microphone's not in my lap.
Oh, the laptop is.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Laptop. It's in my lap.
Okay. Well, I'm going to remind.
Yeah, I just worked. Of course, I have no idea when this episode's going to come out now because I don't know where John is in the releasing of our episodes.
This episode will come out the beginning of July.
Okay, so a few weeks ago, I attended the Cincinnati Concours at Alt Park, took the museum's 1953 Corvette up there to show it off, judged one of the judges for the preservation class or survivor class of automobiles at that event pre-1960. So got to look at some fantastic, unrestored, fairly well-preserved automobiles. And I had a good time talking about the museum with people who were attending the concours and just had a good time. I'll put a plug out there for the Cincinnati Concours Alt Park because it's honestly, I've been to a few of the concours around the country and it's one of my more favorite concours. I like the layout of the field and the park they have there. And it's just a really relaxing, nice day when you're up there. So that's kind of what I've been up to.
I've been kind of like Will. I'm going in so many different directions, playing with cars, and some days, smoking cigars on other days, and I don't know. My goal is to at least do 2 things a day that potentially can generate income, and it's part of starting your own business stuff. So I've been busy with that, and since now that I've whined about being broke, I'm going to remind all the listeners to share out the episodes again. # no driving gloves. We're doing that countdown to 100. Got a stack of Amazon gift cards to give away virtually, and $30 a week up until episode 100, and then that $100 episode on episode, or that $100 card on episode 100. Just share this out on your social media channel or share out your favorite episode of No Driving Gloves, any of them from our back catalog. Share it out. Tag No Driving Gloves, # No Driving Gloves. And I'm watching for them. We've got a couple shares out there, and a couple people can, get a couple of bucks, get themselves an Amazon Dot, or, maybe there's a tool or something on Amazon that you need for your car. Get yourself a set of ramps. I don't know, but with that.
Or I'm sure there's a way that they could just use that Amazon gift card to, support No Driving Gloves and just give us the money back.
Yeah, if you chose to say, "Hey, we're just supporting you," we can figure out how to do that. But no, we want to thank our listeners. Tell a friend about us. There's a jingle that I'd love to steal off of a guy, but that's not a right thing. But if you like what you hear, go tell somebody. With that, I'm out of here. Talk to you guys next week.
Later.
See y'all later.